Delia, you've written quite a bit about disasters and health crises and epidemics. You know, how likely is this to happen? Should we be worried? Is the world sleeping? Is it doing enough? When's the big one going to hit?
Thank you, John. And just to give a quick introduction, my name is Delia Grace, and I'm a veterinarian and an epidemiologist. I work at the International Livestock Research Institute in neighbouring Nairobi, and I also lead a programme on food safety and zoonosis in the CGR research programme, which John leads, Agriculture for Nutrition and Health. But to get back to the much more interesting question of plagues and pandemics and civilization-altering diseases, John asked, what is the probability? Well, it's 1 or 100%, depending on how you like to name probabilities.
In our lifetime?
Exactly. The question is time, but when we look historically, at the moment there is 1 new disease emerging every 4 months. 3/4 of those are zoonotic. That means they jump species from animals to people. The great majority of them are negligible, trivial, they affect a few people someplace, it's hard for them and it may cause those families to drop into poverty. But with a regularity which in the past has been up to 3 to 4 times a century, we see these diseases emerging and as I said, altering civilizations, in some cases collapsing civilizations. In the last century, the 2 big ones were Spanish flu, which hit just after World War I, killed an estimated 40 million people, double the number who died in World War I. And the second was HIV/AIDS, which even at the moment is responsible for 20% of the disease burden in developing countries. The century before saw another series of these epidemics, which were in this case quite strongly associated with the first wave of globalization when Africa opened up and when there was immense unregulated trade between all the different continents. It was the time when you didn't need a passport to come to America, you just got on a boat and went and settled. And that century saw massive plagues throughout Australia, America, and one of the biggest of them was rinderpest, which hit Africa at the end of the last century, probably brought in by Italian troops. This is cattle plague. It's the most deadly disease of cattle. It's the smallpox, if you like, of cattle. It kills them quick. It caused immense famines all the way down through Africa. People lost their animals, they died, the wildlife attacked them, civilizations fell, pastoralists moved out of pastoralism and never moved back again. So these, and this is a history, if we look back in history from Black Death to the depopulation of the Americas, we've seen this happen time and time again. And we see it happen especially at times of great dislocation. Whether it's wars, whether it's globalization, whether it's the unprecedented demography and climate change we're looking at now. In one of our books, we use the phrase, the horsemen of the apocalypse do not ride alone. And that seems to be one of the messages. Whenever things are looking bad or unprecedentedly changing, this is a good opportunity for disease. I don't want to be alarmist, and I hope you're not moving away from your neighbours. And I think the rest of the discussion is going to be more constructive, but I think the message from here is that this danger, it may look very remote, and when you're not in the middle of a pandemic, it seems a very strange and distant thing. But historically, history is not destiny, but when we look at the past, we find that these pandemics come over and over again, especially at times of change.
So if I get you, I mean, it's not like there aren't global efforts to kind of track diseases and see what's new and alert people. You're saying that's helpful, but if we get into something else, it might not be enough.
Yes, up till now, I think a major pandemic has been inevitable. And there has always been action, and people have always done their best in the face of it. There's an argument that as, you know, it's a race, it's a kind of a Red Queen race between, on the one hand, technology, and the other hand, change, and the other hand, rapid evolution of disease. It's hard to know who's going to be the winner. And positively, we can think that now we have many more tools, from molecular epidemiology to surveillance, which were not available in the past. At the same time, we have a lot of risk factors which weren't there in the past.
So it's all there, yeah. So we should expect it at some point.
Expect it at some point.
Okay. I wanted to then move you on a little bit to the more inexorable, the day-to-day things. So safe food, safe water. I mean, many of us take it for granted, many can't. What's the implication? How does that play out in terms of people's lives, in terms of their resilience, and how does it affect them?
Well, I think Anirudh basically set the framework for that when he was explaining the economics of it and what it actually means to between 1 in 5, 1 in 5, 1 in a quarter of people. You actually mentioned that there were 2 diseases, the family in Kenya who were pushed into poverty by 2 diseases. I would say that was 3 diseases, 2 diseases of people and 1 of coffee. And that's one of our new ways of thinking, and Jakob again has done a lot of work in this One Health, that disease is not a human problem, it's a planet's problem, and it's planet, people, all the rest. So when we're looking at the impacts of these day-to-day diseases, which are the ones which force people out of poverty, and we look at which are these diseases, again we find that a lot of the diseases are associated with the big killers are in developing countries, the poorest countries we care most about, still nearly half of all diseases are infectious. There's a transition, that's changing. But among those infectious diseases, then along the top 2 or 3 in most places are the respiratory diseases and the gastrointestinal diseases. Of these gastrointestinal diseases, which are normally in the top 5 in most countries we work in, around 70% are associated with food and water. So agriculture has a lot to answer for in terms of where these diseases are coming from that are pushing people into poverty and hurting their pocket and making them difficult to cope. But I think there are also many solutions in agriculture. I mean, the good news is that if we can get the agriculture better, we can stop both the day-to-day burden of these food and water associated diseases and also slow down the emergence of these avian influenzas or SARS or MERS, which we're now facing. If you be careful if you say hello to a camel in Ethiopia, because we've just done some surveys, still unpublished, showing that Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, this new disease, is widespread through camels all the way across Ethiopia, Kenya, and into West Africa.